Welcome to Fun Palais Podcast, where we are unpacking opinions and changing destinations. I am your host, Shirley Altador, where each week we will chat about how to rise strong out of all types of obstacles that come with relationships. Through personal life experiences and discussions ranging from infidelity, trust, forgiveness, sex, heartbreak, self-love, and so much more. I am passionate and obsessed to provide guidance to every woman to create a better life. Let's dive in, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. With me, your virtual girlfriend. Welcome back to another episode of Fun Palais Podcast, and today we have a special guest with us. We have Marin, who is a coach, speaker, and author with a master's degree in positive developmental psychology and certifications in life coaching and yoga. As the business owner of Yes and, she passionately supports women to free themselves from doubt and fear so they can make their positive impact and experience true fulfillment. Welcome to the show, Marin. How are you today?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. We appreciate you being a guest. So if you want to add to your bio and then lead on to your story.
Yes. So my bio, when I hear it, sounds a little bit intangible if I were to be a guest listening. So a good tangible summary of what I do is I help women make decisions, and specifically help women make decisions that are authentic, which means aligned with their values and their interests and their strengths. I have that background in positive psychology, so that is definitely always on my back burner, on the back of my mind. But also, I'm a huge proponent for our authentic experiences and knowing that every individual has a different experience that informs those decisions. And so it's really my passion and purpose, and is so fun to walk women through these sometimes hard, but always rewarding experience of making decisions and standing confidently in them and navigating the aftermath of decisions, and strengthening that muscle over and over again until authentic decisions become more of the norm instead of those should decisions that many of us fall into.
Very good. I do have a question for you, though. So what's your
Let's go.
bachelor's in?
Is in psychology as well.
Why positive developmental psychology? What sparked you to do that?
Yes. So in my undergrad for psychology, I studied abroad in Denmark, and I took a course that was positive psychology, an intro to that. And that was the first time I was really introduced to that part of psychology, and it hooked me right away. I'm very positive in nature, but also the field of positive psych studies a good life. What happens when life goes quote unquote right, or when we're thriving and flourishing, and how can we help fuel that on the forefront, or help others to have those practices, implement the things that we know work to create more life satisfaction and fulfillment and well-being all around. And I really was attracted to the proactive approach to psychology rather than that treatment side of once things have gone awry, what do we do? That's also an important part of the conversation. But personally, I was hooked right away when I learned that positive psych was a direction I could go. So originally I was actually in the PhD program for positive psychology, and one of my first authentic decisions was to drop that program, and I graduated with my master's degree very confidently and very gratefully in hindsight.
Okay. And is getting the PhD something that would interest you later on in life?
I don't think so. I do entertain the thought every now and then. But really what it came down to, two big proponents of making that switch. One was what we were studying in school of what qualified and helps to create a good balanced life were things I didn't feel like I could personally implement in a PhD program, because there's so much stress, and balance is definitely not the word I would link to my experience in that program. And maybe that's okay. And I know for a lot of my colleagues that was okay, especially when we boundary just this season of life may be a little out of balance, and that's okay for the long run. For me, I really wanted to implement these practices into my own life and practice what I preach rather than stay on that research side. And the other reason the master's felt more aligned with my own self is that it really helped and encourages the implementation of the research and the practices that we study rather than, again, that research side. Both are important. It just came down to what interested me more.
Gotcha. And before we even get to her story, I have all types of questions for her. Why did you choose Denmark?
Denmark was where that program was taking place, but also Denmark has been known to be, or labeled as, the happiest country in the world. And so I thought, what a great place to take a positive psychology course in the happiest country in the world. And a nugget of information I took away from that experience is that when we say happiness, or even positive psychology, has this connotation of what we think of when we think of positivity in the Western world. So smiles and laughter and, outward joy. And what I learned in Denmark, being the happiest country in the world, I would more so label it the most content country in the world, which I actually think is something that I strive to be content and to be with all life experiences rather than constantly reaching for this one single emotion that is happiness.
Makes sense. I like that. And I didn't know that. So I've learned something now. Denmark is the happiest country in the world. Interesting. Kind of like,
at least at one point it was said that. So I'd love a fact checker if that has changed.
We can always fact check.
But yes,
I mean,
at
that's
one point.
good. And it's always a country outside of the U.S. I mean, of course, this is silly. You know how they say Japan is the brightest country, the brightest in everything, the U.S. and all the countries. I think Las Vegas is the brightest in the U.S., but I didn't know. I wonder who's the saddest country, if they even have such a research done. Well, if they have happy, they probably have sad.
Probably. I would be interested to see. And then immediately I'm like, how can I
know.
help?
How can I reach out to them? This is not good. This is not good. Yeah. Okay. All right. So the mic is all yours, my dear. So you're going to share your story.
Yeah. So with your topic in particular and your mission, what I'm really called to share is two, but I'll focus on one, different periods when I made what I qualify as authentic decisions, and therefore doing that in my own life really struck me in how difficult it can be to make authentic decisions, but again, also how rewarding it can be. So the first I already alluded to was switching from the PhD to the master's. And that's the easier one to talk about because it feels more logical. No other human is involved, really. Of course, advisors and colleagues and parents. But at the end of the day, it was my life. It was my career trajectory. And switching, as I've already shared, made sense for me and my strengths and my interests. At the same time, I also had what felt like almost everyone telling me that that was the wrong choice, was to drop out of that PhD program. And I know by working with so many clients that that's a really common experience. When we're making a decision that feels really true to us, sometimes it makes no sense to anyone else. And it was hard. It was hard to sit in that space of knowing my truth while also doubting it because so many people were saying that it was smarter, it was wiser, you'll regret leaving this program. Only so many people make it into this program. You're lucky to be here. You should take this opportunity. And hearing that over and over and over again, I couldn't help but absorb some of that and then start doubting my own instincts. So that was the first decision that I had to face those things. I wanted to face those things, and was able to make that decision, again, that was aligned with me rather than what everyone else was telling me. And I started my business. That was the catalyst to open Yes and to start doing what I am doing now, is that decision. And so I can see the direct payoff and how content and happy and in love with my job and my life now because of that decision. And so it's a really obvious payoff. And then I'll let you go with all the questions. The other decision that I was really called, again, especially with your podcast and your mission to share with your audience, is the decision to leave a relationship. And that was also an authentic decision, one that was really aligned with my needs, my values, where I saw my life going and where I didn't see my life going. And that was out of alignment with this person I was in a relationship with. But of the two decisions, that one for sure was the harder of the two, and to this day remains the harder of the two, because the quote unquote payoff of that hard decision doesn't feel as black and white.
Mm-hmm.
There are always those, ifs or, could have, should have, would have done things differently, caring about this person still, and yet there being tension because of ending of a relationship, as there often is. And also this concept of authentic decisions, something I've learned and come to believe about authenticity is that we're always changing. So at one point, to be in that relationship was the authentic
Mm-hmm.
decision, and how to cope with that I changed or my future changed or needs changed or the circumstance changed, and then it's no longer authentic. But then holding that internal space of knowing that something was authentic at one time and is no longer, and the questions and the nuance in that decision and that experience is something that I am grateful for, because it allows me as a coach to show up for my clients, and a speaker to show up for my audiences, and my book as well, with more
Mm-hmm.
compassion, that these aren't always black and white, really easy, always obviously rewarding decisions. Sometimes authentic decisions can be really tough, and they don't always lead to that joyous elation that we were talking about with Western society labels as happiness and positivity. Sometimes alignment or authenticity might feel more like grief or like sorrow of letting something go that was right for a time and is no longer. And so to hold space for that as part of our conversation and part of my mission and purpose is also really important to me.
Wonderful. Oh, this is awesome. You're my first guest that actually have like both a romantic and platonic relationship experience to share. And I like that because we can cover both. So we're going to first talk about the PhD, you dropping that and everybody telling you, no, you shouldn't. No, 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 no. Okay. So first, do you feel as though it was because people wanted you to have the accolades that came
Mm.
along with PhD? Get your
Mm-hmm.
doctorates, Marin. It'll take you further, which they probably can't tell you what exactly does further mean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think there's a perception that is starting to
Mm-hmm.
dismantle, which I'm very interested to watch and excited to see. There's a perception that more education equals more opportunities. And like you were speaking to the accolades, having PhD after my name would equal more opportunities regardless of what I chose to
Mm-hmm.
do. So I think a lot of individuals didn't see the
Mm-hmm.
disadvantage of getting the PhD. It was only the advantage, because I could do what I wanted to do with my master's, whether I had a master's or a
Mm-hmm.
PhD. Um, and so I think that the main driver was just they didn't see, and even I could lump myself into there. There isn't, I don't think, necessarily a long-term disadvantage of that
Mm-hmm.
PhD. However, that short-term disadvantage, and then the long-term implications of not owning my own truth and my own desires and needs, in kind of surrendering to just going with the flow and getting the PhD anyway, that has for sure long-term impacts. Um, and the belief system that I need a PhD or would have better opportunities with a PhD, I've come to believe that actually that part of the story, I've shared it so many times and so many people connect with my story of switching from the PhD to the master's. I could absolutely defend that that created more opportunities for me to go into the master's. So I think it was more about perception, and I don't think anyone at that time was out to
Mm-hmm.
force me into something I didn't want to do. They were looking out for my best interest, and just showing what they thought was obvious of there's no downside to doing this, so just keep doing it.
Exactly. Now, I'm glad you mentioned that because you're absolutely right. The times are changing and how people are making a living is extremely different. They have been changing, but now more than ever. And this is not, let me like this little disclaimer. I'm not saying anyone should drop out of college. I'm not saying you should not go to college. I'm just saying there is a shift that is happening. And the more education does not necessarily mean nowadays the more money that you're going to make. And of course, it all depends on what you go to school for. One thing that very much upsets me when I was a little girl, there were four professions that I knew about: being a doctor, being a lawyer, being a nurse, and being a teacher. That's it. I didn't know anything else. I knew there were other jobs, but my little brain couldn't comprehend, well, what are these jobs? What do they do? And how do I learn these jobs? And I knew other things like cosmetology and stuff, but those are the only four that were ever introduced to me. And I hope in schools now, and I'm not even sure, my two kids are in school and I don't think I've ever asked them the questions, but I intentionally make sure they know there are other opportunities out there that you can look into instead of the four that were only told to me, or that, like, back in like the early 90s, you were you going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse, or a teacher. Anything else is like, that's not so important. And it's a shame that most professions are looked down upon, because I do feel as though, and like you said, they most likely they weren't trying to be hurtful, Marin, but it was just like, oh my God, continue your education. You want to further yourself. You want that PhD after your name. This is a good thing. This is a positive thing. And I'm going to ask you, how old are you? Because you look 18. Okay. Now, of course, they cannot see you. They're going to see one little picture of you. That's it. But I'm looking at a very young girl. You already have your master's. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
Yeah, I'm almost 28.
Okay, so you're a freaking grown woman. Okay, so yeah, you're not 18. Add 10 years onto that, but you look very young, Marin. So you're talking about, did you just finish? How old were you when you finished your master's?
26.
Okay, so within the last 2
26.
years. Okay, so you did the whole 4 years, and then you did what, the 2 years after? Is my math right?
Yes.
Okay, very
Yep.
good. So traditional, nothing out of the ordinary and nothing longer than usual. So right now, if you had stayed in that PhD program, is the PhD program 2 years for psychology?
The PhD is up to 7 years.
Get the fuck out of here. What?
Yeah.
You would have still been in school?
Yeah. I'm still very good friends with a lot of the colleagues that I studied with, and they are just graduating.
Shit.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Okay.
In my book, I tell the moment where I had the thought of, okay, hold on. I don't think I want to be here, but could I just like suck it up? And then I looked at the projector screen and we were going through the requirements and I saw 7 years and I thought,
no. Heck no. I can't do this.
No way.
No. I'm confident in my decision now. I'm good.
Yes. That was that last like cherry on top that I was like,
okay.
Yeah, no.
So you were about 25 when you probably were contemplating this and making the decision, because you graduated with your master's at 26. I have to applaud you at 25 to be so confident in that decision that you were making, because at 25, you're still like, a whole bunch of confusion is going through your mind. So I applaud you for that. And, I want to ask you, what do you think for anybody, a woman that is 25 and in school right now and contemplating about a major? Should they get their master's? Should they further their education? What helped you solidify that decision?
I lay it all out in my book. So if they really want to dive in, there's a 7-step process that you can follow.
Give me one big thing that
shameless plug.
Out.
Yeah, but the biggest thing really is, and I love that you're bringing age into this conversation actually, because when I started my life coaching business, I got a lot of understandable kickback of like, okay, a 26-year-old is going to tell me how to live my life. Some of my clients were, double my age, if not more. And what I saw instead of age, which yes, age, there's wisdom, there's life experience, there's a lot of benefit in living more years and therefore having advice. And as a coach, I do not give advice. I offer those questions to bring someone's own advice out in them. And furthermore, because I started this business so young and with that decision, I felt like I actually had a leg up on others who may have already paved the path for themselves, or gone so far down a road that it's harder at some point, potentially, that's a belief, to turn back or to change gears, right? If you're already in a circumstance that you worked for 10 years to create. I've seen in my clients how difficult that can be, how much more difficult that can be to stand confidently in a decision, especially if it's against the status quo or against what has been built already. And so, to specifically your question in the 25-year-olds out there who may be in the face of a decision, is to potentially see your age as your greatest strength right now. You have the opportunity to change paths. It may feel like, because I can take myself back to that moment, it may feel like you've already spent X amount of years going down X pathway. And there's so much more time and opportunities and agility in front of you and with you right now, that if you're feeling called towards something, or if you're not feeling called towards something, trust that. And it probably feels scary as heck, but that's going to be there. In my experience, that's going to be there. If it's there now, it'll be there now, and it'll be there for your midlife crisis. So when do you want to make the decision, now or in 25 more years? And that's up to you, totally up to you. There's not really a right or wrong way of doing it. But to not let age or anyone else convince you that just because of how old you are means anything. You can always see, at least I can always see the opposite side. So if someone says you're too young, maybe that's actually your strength. And if you're feeling like you're getting advice from those around you, absolutely listen, and they may have some wisdom tucked in their back pocket from their experiences, but then always, always, always filter it through yourself. Does that even apply to your circumstance and to your personality and to your version of success? And that's like the ultimate filter, is your own gut instinct, your own feeling and desires.
Absolutely. And you know what? Giving them permission to let them know that it's okay. Your decision, whatever decision you're making in that season in your life that you're in, it is okay. There's really, truly no right or wrong, because it is your decision. And, you know, society plays a major role in decisions that you make. And at times you feel confident in your decision, but people, especially, rather it be close people or people you don't even know, will influence that decision and make you question, like, am I doing the right thing? It could be some simple little quote or something you read on social media, and that will change the whole trajectory of where your mind was. And you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing now after reading this. So I totally agree with you with that. And your book, Ready Enough, Your 7-Step Guide for Life's Hardest Decisions, is that available on Amazon, Audible?
Yes, Amazon. It will be Audible soon. I'm slowly recording that. But yes, Amazon, and your local bookstore can also order it. So if you would rather go local, just give them a call. They may not have it stocked yet until I get bigger, but they can still order it. It's available everywhere.
Wonderful. And that information will also be on the website for you guys to order. So I like this. So I have another question. Of course, I'm going to have a whole bunch of questions. But at 26 years old, instead of you working for someone, you decided to start your own business. What did your parents say about this? And if you can give us the brief version of, how did you get started financially? Were you working the whole time you were in college?
I've been working since I was 16, so that certainly helped. I also have very, very supportive parents. So they helped me as well, which means I could save during all of those years of working, which I know is a privileged place to be. Not everyone can be that way. And so I did have this little bit of a safety net under me. And how did I do it? Looking back, I was naive, which is, I actually think, a blessing at that time, because had I known what it meant to start a business, I probably wouldn't have had the courage to do it. But also, I tried to work for someone else. Leading up to my graduation with my master's degree, I was applying for evaluation jobs, which I was a professionally trained evaluator in addition to the positive developmental psych program. And I did take some opportunities, one opportunity after graduation, but I promptly quit that and just went all in with my business, which really comes down to my strength, but also can be seen as my weakness too. We can see both sides of being very independent, really loving my autonomy and being able to make my own decisions. And that's rather hard to do under the guise of someone else's ideas for my hours and commitment level and what I should be doing with work.
But that's phenomenal. At 26, you were at that point where you're like, you know what? You did tap in and go work for someone and you knew you didn't like that. And this is what owning your decision is. And you are a prime example of that because even in college, you were owning your decision when it came to not pursuing the PhD program. You went and tried working somebody and you're like, I can't do this. Owning your decision again and starting your own business. And, just to add a little insight, God always says you do things afraid, not do it with anxiety, but you do it afraid, and just trust him. So that's exactly what you did. I wouldn't call it naive. You chose what you wanted to do. You knew what you wanted to do and you trusted yourself. And that's really all it was. Yeah, we're always naive about something. I feel like we wake up sometimes. Every day I'm learning something. So you just trusted your gut. That's what you did.
Yeah.
You trusted your
Yeah.
gut and you started your own business. So you've been in business for how long now?
Celebrated 3 years in September.
Congratulations. Last month was your anniversary. That is
Yes.
great. How
Yes.
do you feel now, 3 years later? Do you still want to be an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I used to believe that everyone should be an entrepreneur. Not should be, but I would very quickly encourage anyone, historically speaking, to start their own business and go
Mhm.
for it. What I feel now about business ownership is that I feel very grateful and even more confident in my decision to have my own business because I also love the side of business
Mhm.
ownership, which is like from everything organizing my financials to hiring to doing the books and my own schedule and keeping myself accountable and all of the things that come along with being a business owner, marketing, creating a website, all the back end stuff. I also love that, which I didn't necessarily know going into it. But I don't think had I not loved those things, I'd still be at least in the same type of business as I am now. Maybe I could hire out or delegate or collaborate with someone else to
Mhm.
balance that. But yeah, I love where I'm at, and what I didn't know 3 years ago was that not only would I love
Mhm.
coaching and writing and speaking, I also love running this business and creating the vision and keeping it going and doing really the tedious tasks
This is
too.
great. This is great. I'm trying to think. At 26, I think I wanted to start a business, but I didn't take it as seriously as you did. I definitely didn't take it as seriously as you did. I love the idea of being an entrepreneur, but as you said, you don't know what is entailed when it comes to being an entrepreneur because you do wear many hats: marketing, social media manager, bookkeeping. You're wearing many hats when you first start off as an entrepreneur until you can financially afford to delegate certain work and certain tasks out so you can focus on more important things. And well, I shouldn't say more
Mm-hmm.
important. Let me take that back. Everything in part of the business is important, but you can focus on the belly of what keeps the business operating.
Right, right. Yep.
So,
Yeah, that was really
yeah.
well put.
All right, so now we're going to move on to the romantic part. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to move on to the romantic part. So, this relationship that you were in, from what age to what age?
Ooh, good question. It was throughout undergrad and into grad school. So 22 to 25
Okay, so
ish.
3 years.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
were you in Denmark for undergrad?
For just 1 month. It was a really short
Okay,
program. Yeah.
so for the master's, for the graduates program, you were in Denmark.
Master's program was in
Oh,
California. Denmark was just a study abroad
oh,
one
that's
month
it. I thought
trip.
it was like the whole
Yeah.
graduate. Okay, just 1 month.
No.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So were you guys having a distant relationship?
Yes, we met in undergrad. So at that time, it was not distant. But then when I went to grad school and he went after undergrad to military, to the
Yeah.
Navy. And so it was distant in multiple
Yeah.
ways, in multiple places from
Okay,
that
so
point.
for about 2 years it was distant. Yeah, for the
Yes.
first year it was
Yes.
not 2 years. I'm trying to keep up so the listeners can understand as well. Okay, so for the remainder 2 years it was distant because he was in the Navy and you were in California in your graduate program.
hmm
Gotcha. Now, why did you end it after 3 years? What was the underlying reason?
Yeah. There, again, to this book. So I disclose the story in there. Um, but as I was coming up with how to summarize these authentic decisions, I was living with a quote for a while of, if you're wanting something more, and using that even as marketing material, if you're wanting something more, but it just didn't sit right, back to what I was saying in my intro of, I'm really grateful for this relationship to have happened because it provides this additional perspective on these decisions. It wasn't that I wanted something more. It wasn't that there was anything even wrong with that relationship, which makes it that much harder. Um, I mean, every relationship has things to improve. Our communication was the main thing that I journaled about frequently
Okay.
of wanting to improve. Um, but really, it was just, again, that gut feeling of, there's something different. This doesn't feel right. It's not working. Um, and having to trust that. And that's why it was so
Hmm.
hard. Um, and and of course, the tensions of grad school and long distance and military, and all of that fed into it as well. But it really was just this sense of, there's something different, and it had felt that way for a while, and I needed to trust that. And I did, but it
It
was
was
really
really
hard.
hard. Okay. Are you single now?
No, I am in a
Okay,
relationship.
so you're dating
Uh,
someone completely
yes,
different, not the same party. Okay,
correct.
gotcha. So when you left that situation or the relationship, yeah, ship, when you left that ship sailing out at sea, how did he feel?
I tended to talk more than he did. So that question, to this day, I would love an answer to.
Oh,
um, but I know really hurt. And um, I've actually found this to be kind of a common theme as I talk to more individuals about
hmm,
relationships, that we were at the point in our relationship where it was either, let's get married or let's split up. And so I think he was more on that track of, we're getting married after the deployment he was on. I'm not sure
hmm.
about that. But that's my sense. And so I can imagine, and to this day I feel bad for a breakup during military service, that he already had plenty on his
Hmm.
plate. So I can imagine that, just with, being deployed and having all of that, plus the relationship ending, um and me being the one to do it, so it wasn't on his own call, to be really hurt. But I am not
I
sure.
gotcha. So would you say that, how can I describe it so they can listen and kind of put themselves in put themselves in your shoes at the time? I mean, everyone's relationship dynamic is different. People break up, people get back together. It happens. I feel like a relationship is just a life experience. We're not taught how to deal with relationships in school. You really kind of just grow up and you get with somebody and you start figuring things out then. When you're young, especially that first relationship, you do not have the proper healthy tools to cultivate a healthy relationship. A lot of the stuff going on, I feel like, in your first little relationship is all trial and error, and you getting to know yourself and also getting to know that person. But what do you feel, as though you did mention communication? So there was some type of like space. It was just like this fogginess, I'm assuming. And I'm trying to put this in picture form so people can kind of see it.
Mhm.
Was it just you knew, like, were you asking the questions of your head? Could I spend the rest of my life with this person? Could I have children with this person? How is the communication in the relationship? Is this someone that I see a real, true future with? Are these the questions that were going on
Mhm.
in your head?
Yeah, yeah. And interestingly, I talk very openly with my current partner about that relationship because it had such a big impact on my life, has a big impact on my life. And the answers to a lot of those questions were yes. So, could I have seen myself marrying that person? Yes. Having kids with that person? Yes. The life with that person? Yes. I could see what that was. And again, that's why that feeling of it wasn't something more, something was like so wrong or bad. It was there's just something
Mm-hmm.
different. Um, and and the communication piece felt really frustrating, and I can read old journal entries to take me back to that time of and now I'm as you were saying, you learn more about yourself in relationships as you just
Mm-hmm.
experience them. I think that really is kind of trial by fire. Now I've come to know that I really connect my deepest connections and my point of safety is through intimate conversation. So not just conversations about movies or about whatever, this type of conversation that you and I are
Mm-hmm.
having of a deep, depth, vulnerable conversation. And at the time, I didn't feel like I was able to do that with that person. And I'm not even going to try to figure out why because I don't have that answer. And that was really frustrating because it felt like if I could just change something or if I could just, connect in a different way or just go to concerts or do something that's fun and that we enjoy time with each other and just let that be enough, then this could work. And again, those answers to those questions, I could see that. And those were the same questions my friends also in helping me try to figure that out at the time were saying, do you see him being the father of your
Mm-hmm.
kids and getting married? And it was tough because it was like yes and the name of my business yes and something is off or I don't feel this connection and I can't quite explain it, which I can imagine was equally if not more frustrating for him because then if I can't explain it or communicate it, how can someone else understand it even? And it's just I didn't understand it and still am learning, continue will probably forever continue to learn what that need is of mine and why it was so crucial that if a relationship didn't have it, nothing else mattered, even if everything else was great.
Very important identifier because for you, that was a red flag. Conversation, deep conversation is important to you, and your partner at that time, you weren't getting that, and you knew you weren't getting that. And that was something
Mhm.
that Marin, you needed. You
Right.
didn't need, even if the distance, you had already been doing distance for 2 years and you were able to answer yes to all these questions, but there was one isolated issue that was leaving you empty. Conversation is important. I want to have deep conversations. I want us to connect 15, 20 minutes a day and talk about how our day was, what's going on in my life, or this and that. And I'm assuming at that time you were not getting that from that partner and you knew that. And a lot of women, this is why, again, I applaud you. You look so young, and I'm going to say this yet again, but you're only 28 years old. You're almost 30, but you are able to make these hard decisions and yet still know your self worth, love yourself, to make decisions that you were comfortable with. You didn't decide to stay in this relationship. And of course, this is a hypothesis because we don't know what would have happened. But let's say you did stay in this relationship with this gap, it would have grown bigger and bigger and bigger over the years because you knew in the beginning that was something you were missing. Deep conversation is important to you. You weren't getting it. You can't change your partner. And a lot of times women go into relationships thinking they're going to change an individual. Me, myself, have been a victim of it, thinking if I do this, they'll change. If I do this, they'll do something different, which is the wrong way to think and the wrong way to look at it. Because if you're not getting it now, how do you know you're going to get it later? It would be different if you were getting it and then a change happened, then there was a shift. Then you can maybe talk about, okay, honey, what's going on? There seems to be a shift in our relationship. We're not doing this anymore. That's why I'm saying this is all hypothesis because we don't know. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
many women will fall into that trap, will see the red flag in the beginning and be like, oh, I'll take care of it. I'll fix it. If I do this, things
Right.
will change. But you knew and you were like, no, I got to walk away from this because you were able to answer yes to all the questions and put all the check marks. But then there was one check mark that you had to make. And that's huge because if you have 50, how can I say, 50 boxes that you need to check off, and you're checking 49 out of the 50. And I know I'm being exaggerating, but this is a good example to use. You're checking 49 out of the 50, but that one box, that's how important it was to you. I mean, if I can explain it to it like that, that's what it was. That one box, you
Mm-hmm.
could not put a check in there. And you had to ask myself, could I be with this person and not have this fulfillment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And what stands out to me as you're sharing that is at the time, I felt very aware of I can't change this person because I had heard that so many
Mm-hmm.
times. But what I was struggling with, which maybe to add to this conversation and to add to anyone's tool belt or mantra in the back of your mind when you're navigating
Mm-hmm.
relationships, is I was trying to convince myself not that I could change him, because I had heard that enough times, I can't do that, but that I could change myself. That eventually I could just connect in a different way. I could, it was kind of like my fault for needing to connect in this way or for not letting the conversations we were having be enough. And maybe with time or whatever, I'll just it'll be
Mm-hmm.
fine. I call that part of myself the cool girl. And it'll be fine. I'll be fine. I don't need that. It's okay. Um, and I think your example of that one box was such a heavy, important central box that it just kept knocking on my door of this needs to be here. This really needs to be here. It's not here. You do need it. It's okay that you need it. Someone else, can help you fulfill that rather than you feeling like you have to fix yourself. Um, and then make a decision from there. Even with 49
Yeah,
checked.
absolutely. That's good. And, I like how you said you tried to change yourself to
Mm-hmm.
conform to the situation, but even that wasn't working. And
Mm-hmm.
this is great way for people to realize that we need to pay attention to these little cues, these little things, these little red flags when our mind or our body or just certain things that stand out that okay, I'm not comfortable in this situation. How do I handle it? And I see the reason why it was a hard decision for me to walk away from, because you still loved the person, you still cared about the person, but you put yourself first, which a lot of women don't do,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
also, the good part about this is you weren't afraid to let go.
Mm-hmm.
If it was meant to be, it would have been. It would have came back.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, relationships are experiences. Life is an experience. But you weren't afraid to let go. You weren't afraid to be alone. Finish your studies, focus on what you needed to focus on, and let life take its course. Most people are
Mm-hmm.
scared to be alone. Well, if I leave him, then am I going to find someone better? Or I feel like what we'll try to do, especially as women, we'll try to, well, let me look at the positive and the negatives. If the positive outweigh the negatives, maybe I can make it work. All these things we're rationalizing in our minds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, that pros cons list is a useful tool, but not the only tool, and one that we often clutch. We're
yeah.
like, but if I
Mm-hmm.
weigh it, the positives are still, but it's like, the weight of that box on that con
Yeah.
side is
It's like you're
is
reminiscing.
a
It's
heavy
like a
one.
reminisce.
Yeah.
It's like what's the, what's the past tense of reminisce?
Reminisced.
Reminisced?
I don't
I
know
don't
if
know if
that's
that's
true.
the right word I want to use, but it's kind of what I'm trying to say is like we do this all the time when when there's like a trauma in your relationship, And that's why they say you shouldn't make decisions in a very emotional state, and you want to be at a level playing field, because you'll start thinking about, but, we went out to the movies this night and it was so great. We did this and it was so great. That's what I mean by, like, you're thinking about all those things, but then you really do need to focus on, but that one issue is not working for me. So how is relationship now with your present partner? And do you still feel confident about your decision? And be honest with us. Do you miss? Well, maybe I shouldn't, because I don't want him to hear and say, Marin, what the heck? I don't want you to get you in trouble, girl.
My current partner, Tyler, as I mentioned earlier, we talk a lot about, well, we
Gotcha.
have talked at depth about that past relationship, and he actually has, which makes it feel more comfortable for me to disclose the true feelings I have, because he also has a very similar, interestingly, past relationship where they could have worked, but just that one thing, and it didn't. And we've said to each other, my current partner and I, Tyler, that we don't believe there's one person and one person only, the whole soulmate idea. And in fact, these previous partners that both of us had, it could have worked with maybe a different time or a different, even decision in the moment. Maybe that would have led to something just as great. And to know that actually feels more true and vulnerable, and fosters a deeper connection with my current partner, because it really comes down to it being a decision. the theme of everything. It's a choice to be here, and it's a choice to choose this person, rather than this is the one person I can't live without, or this was meant to be. Some people are really empowered by that, and so I by no means want to take that away from anyone. For me personally, it feels more empowering to say I choose to be here, and it's not meant to be, and there isn't one person. This isn't my one person. There may be multiple people, including past people, and that's how it is. And it makes it, I think, even more of a testament to my current partner that I continue to say, and I'm showing up here, and this is where I am, and this is my decision, and I feel the same in return.
This is great that you and Tyler can have these discussions, even talking about your past relationship, because and I know you've heard this, people will often say, my past is my past, and we don't need to talk about it. We don't need to bring it up. But we don't realize, as the human species, how much our past affects our present and our future. And trying to put it in a little box and put it away is not going to be beneficial for you. That's not a good thing at all whatsoever. You have to talk about them. You have to talk about these things. Trying to keep them caged and keep them boxed is not beneficial for you or even your partner or whoever it is you're with, your family member, because why are you hiding away from them? So that's a good thing you and Tyler are able to have these difficult discussions. I mean, you're talking about your partner and his partner from your past. Most people don't want to talk about that. They don't. But the fact that you guys can engage, that's maturity right there. And we were talking about this in conversations before, where when we start dating people, we're scared to bring up certain things. And if we change the type of questions we ask or the type of conversations we have, and if we talk about the hard stuff, maybe it will help weed out someone that is probably not even going to be a good fit for you. Like, ask a question. Have you ever cheated on somebody? Why? What was the reason? Do you think you're going to cheat on me? Do you think you're going to have a relapse? These are all important questions to have. It's kind of like alcoholism and drug addiction. Look, are you going to have a relapse? Let's discuss this now. Okay? Because I don't want to discuss this when I find out you cheat on me, and now is when we're having this important conversation. Let's talk about it right now. That goes along with finances or just even sexual conversations that people don't want to have because they're hard conversations. We want to keep the icing on the cupcake nice and smooth. Don't want to mess it up until you have an eruption. And then now when your emotions are all over the place is when you want to talk about shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are, as you said, those are hard questions to ask, and also be willing to answer, to be willing not only with your partner, but with
Mm-hmm.
yourself, to bring up things that maybe you're not proud of, or even a little scared of, or just feel feelings about, to have those conversations. I agree, it's really important. And of course, to know, maybe first date isn't when we talk about those things, but to, once we have that sense of trust and safety and are building that, to absolutely bring those things up. And to keep, I mean, it's not even a once and done thing. I think about Tyler and my conversations, and every now and then it'll come up again, and it still feels scary to bring up, and especially with the dialogue of, oh, I shouldn't be talking about this, or it's bad that I feel this way. But once we start to judge our own feelings and emotions and desires, it not only creates a dissonance within ourselves and our own ability to be authentic and therefore make authentic decisions and authentic conversations, but also between our partner, and to let that be a genuine connection. That distance, that gap we were talking about in a different context in this conversation, starts to form if we don't, at least in my experience, bring up the hardest the hardest things when we're ready, and in a supportive space. My Tyler and I went to therapy over the last many months as well, and so to know also when to bring in those external support systems, but absolutely to have those conversations, at least for me. And for others, I'm sure others don't value communication or that type of conversation as much as I do, and just like they probably value something more than I do. So we all have our things that are kind of top on our list, but especially if communication in that form of connection is important, to enter those conversations bravely with knees shaking, is fosters greater connection and vulnerability and truth with ourselves and with them.
Exactly. Now, before we start talking about your business, where you are now, and how these two decisions have changed your life, tell us what happened in 2018.
In 2018.
You were looking over something.
Looking over Yosemite, that story.
Yes. Tell us a
Yes,
brief. Yes, you did tell me that. I told you don't know what I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, 2018. I was road tripping from California back home to the Midwest after grad school, and I had already made the decision to leave that relationship we've talked about today, but still, similar to the PhD, had doubt about it. And especially, like I was mentioning, when friends were trying to support me and saying, well, like, would you see marrying him or getting back together, and those answers coming up and it just adding mud to all of it, there was just still a lot of uncertainty, and I wouldn't say at that time I was feeling that grounded confidence I really wanted to feel with the decision. And the Yosemite story is that on this road trip, we planned where we were going to stop. Yosemite was one of those places. A lot of friends and colleagues told me about how amazing Yosemite was, but I had never been. They showed me their pictures. And so I had this inkling of what Yosemite would be. And then we got there, and it just blew me away. It was unbelievable. It was breathtaking, and I had this connection in my mind. Maybe this is just my life coach self-coaching myself through, but this metaphor immediately formed as I was looking over the Yosemite Valley, and I thought, this is what my future relationship is. People can tell me that it's going to be good. They can assure me that I've made the right decision. I can assure myself. I can even paint quote unquote pictures of a future relationship or a future me in my journal or whatever it is. But until I get to that moment, it just can't match it, because it's just almost unimaginable when we're in all the past. And so that moment provided just the right amount of trust I needed to really get me through and hold firm and stand confidently in my decision and hold faith in what was coming. And then when I met Tyler, I remember journaling, this is the Yosemite relationship. It was that feeling of, wow. And especially on the communication front, I was it was unbelievable. It was that same feeling of Yosemite of, wow, yeah, this is the conversation. This is the type of communication that I knew I needed, but I couldn't quite put my finger on back then. And I couldn't conceptualize it until it was here, and now it's here, and it's fabulous.
That's an awesome experience. And I like how you slipped in there. For a brief moment, I didn't feel confident about my decision. And it just goes to tell you, we're all human. You know, she's not on this show today saying like, oh my gosh, I'm so perfect in all my decisions. And I just, moved on forward, and every decision that I made, I had no problem. No, I mean, we all have our days where we do have second thoughts. There are times where we're like, and I know you probably ask yourself, Marin, are you really doing the right thing by not continuing your PhD program, by breaking up with this person? Even though I have 49 of the boxes checked, this one little box, is it that big of an issue? These are questions you're consistently always asking yourself. So now where your life is at today, after these two situations, how do you feel now making decisions with the way your path has went? You stopped at your master's. You didn't go into a PhD program that you thought you were going to go in. You were in a relationship for 3 years. 49 of the boxes were checked. One measly little box was not checked. And you decide to walk away from this. Now you're with a new partner. You're running a business right out of college. Most people do not do that. They're looking for a job. Granted, you did work briefly, but that was briefly. You're running a business. Most people do not run a business outside of college unless they go work for their parents or their uncle or auntie or some family member who's already have something in operation.
Yeah, what I tell my clients all the time is the metaphor of using weights at a gym. You don't walk into a gym. Most people don't walk into a gym and pick up the 100-pound dumbbell and start there. And decision-making and authentic decision-making and everything that goes along with it. I mentioned there's 7 steps in the model I created. So that's also includes trust. We don't start with the 100-pound trust dumbbell or the 100-pound decision dumbbell or the 100-pound confidence. Usually it's, the 2 pounds, maybe it's even like half a pound, and start small. I give the example oftentimes of one way to practice this idea of authentic decision-making is to say, wow, yeah, I'm really thirsty. I could use a sip of water. That's an authentic decision. And it's, a 1 pound dumbbell for both of us to start there. And then just like at the gym, you build up. And eventually you can make the 100-pound decisions. And so what I feel today is that, I guess 2 things. One is that I feel the strength that I've built over time for making authentic decisions. I don't second guess myself nearly as much, although like you said, we all have our days. I have so much more self-trust and confidence, and of course, share it with my clients and see not only in my own life, but in others' lives, how important and impactful this way of living is. But also I have more compassion and understanding to when that 1 pound dumbbell is needed and that it's okay. And if we can take, and I can take, if there's a big decision in front of me to say, okay, how can I make this a 1 pound decision? I don't need to start with the big thing. And also just take my best guess. And like, if I drop a 1 pound dumbbell on my foot, it'll hurt, but it's not as bad as something heavier. And to let that consistent cycle be the driver and the encourager and the way of building and fostering trust and strength, rather than so much pressure to make the big decisions and make it now and make it certain and move on and stand confidently forever. It's okay if we start small, and it's okay if we stay small, not in our expression, hopefully, but in our capacity to decide and take one little step, one little decision, one little ounce of trust at a time. And that'll grow, and also that can stay consistent too throughout all of life.
Absolutely. Now, as you all know, Ready Enough, Your 7-Step Guide for Life's Hardest Decisions is the book that she has written. and it is available on Amazon and in bookstores. And can they purchase it off your website as well?
Go to my website and there's a button that will
Wonderful.
link. So
So,
yes.
and she talks about definitely more in there of the 7 steps. You know, as she just said, start small. Marin is saying start small. Start with the 2 pound, the 5 pound, the 10 pound, the 15 pound. Work your way up. Don't automatically go into the gym and start with the 100 pound dumbbell. As we said, most people do not do that. You start small. Don't be afraid to start small. And through this whole podcast, I think as everyone will be aware listening to it, what's important is owning your decision. Owning whatever decision is you're going to make at that time in that season of your life, just owning it. It's okay if a mistake happens because truly, let's be honest, life is a total experience. From the time you're a child to the time you go from infancy to toddler to teenager to young adolescence, you have to learn to walk. You have to learn to crawl before you can walk. Then once you start walking, you're running all over the place now. It's baby steps. I mean, the first 18 years of your life, that's all it is. And then it seems like once we're adults, Maureen, do you feel like adults just want to rush in everything? Hurry up. I just want to get this done. I want to get this business and I want to be at 6 figures like yesterday. But I don't want to put in the work that is necessary. I just want to be at 6 figures. I don't want to do any marketing or anything like that. Just give me the money. No, you got to put in the work. You got to put in the work. Own your decisions and don't be afraid to own your decisions. Someone always has something to say, regardless what you're doing in this world. If this young lady right here, really listen to what some people were telling her about not getting that PhD program, I don't think she would have started her own business because she probably would have felt like, oh my God, I was a failure. If I just had gotten the PhD program, maybe I could have gotten this better job. It is harder for you to think of negative thoughts than it is positive thoughts. So you want to stop that now. Stop that now. But what is one piece of encouragement you'd like to provide to the women out there? Either something you live by, a mantra you want to provide them. It could be something simple like own your decisions, which I tell them all the time.
Yeah. It's really just summarizing where we landed, but it's not only own your decisions, but again, make a decision. Like make something. And again, small. It can be an example I use because a lot of the women I work with are considering a career change. It's like you don't have to decide whether you're leaving your job today. In fact, I encourage that maybe not we do that unless you're really confident. But it's like, do you want to decide to look at other jobs? Do you want to decide to open the job board? Do you want to decide to tell your significant other that you're considering this? These are huge decisions. And the other thing about small decisions and that encouragement to make a decision is you can always make another decision. And I realize some decisions have greater impact than others. For instance, a breakup that has an impact on a relationship. So to keep that in mind and to be respectful of that, but also to cut ourselves a little slack and remind ourselves that a lot of times we can make another decision. If that one didn't feel right, if it, for whatever reason, we learned there was a better, quote unquote, better decision, now that we have different information and data to make that decision off of, you can make it again. So just start small and make a decision.
Awesome. And powerful words. Marin, I want you to thank you so much for being a guest on the show and enlightening us with your story, your experience. I mean, it's powerful because someone out there, I guarantee you, is going through the same thing you're going through when it comes to platonic, and they're in college right now trying to either decide on a major or should they continue, should they not continue. In a romantic relationship, should I stay with that one box unchecked or should I walk away? Someone's experiencing that. 49 out of the 50. Remember, guys, 49 out of the 50. That 50 is huge. 50 is huge. So I want to thank you again for being a guest. And my listeners, as you always know, thank you for listening, and to love yourself, voice yourself, and be yourself. Until the next podcast, have a great one, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Fanpale Podcast. If you want to continue the conversation or share your takeaways, I want to hear from you. Head on over to the website or join our Facebook community and comment your favorite part of the show or share your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Chat with you next week.